All right, back to a little more news here. Black Lives Matter Global, with millions of dollars pouring in, spending very little of that money to actually benefit Black lives. Probably shouldn't surprise you. We've had so many of these stories lately. The organization giving very little financial support to its various chapters. Here to talk about this story is Andrew Kerr. He's the investigative reporter from the Daily Caller who broke this story about BLM. Also this morning, we have Christopher Wright, who is a conservative activist and founder of the Conservative Republican Alliance of New York. Thumbs up. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Andrew, I want to start with you. You broke this story. It's an incredible story. How did you figure all this out?
Thanks, Rob, for having me on. So back in June, we reported that financial statements for Black Lives Matter Global Network, the national arm of the group, their former fiscal sponsor, showed that they spent over $4.5 million on consultants, travel, and personnel costs, kind of in-house expenses in their 2017, 18, and 19 fiscal years, while at the same time granting only about $330,000 to outside organizations such as the local Black Lives Matter chapters that the founders of Black Lives Matter say do all the work on the ground. Right. So the local chapters that are the ones actually doing the work of the movement are getting very little money. The former Black Lives Matter Global Network director, Kaylee Scales, told me at the time that these figures don't represent the types of in-kind support that we give these local chapters. But on Monday, a coalition of 10 local Black Lives Matter chapters, including Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and other major chapters, they came out and said the national arm has no financial transparency. To our knowledge, local chapters receive little to no financial support. They're making decisions without our consent. Yeah. And the local chapters aren't very happy. And shouldn't come as a surprise that much of the media is not really interested in this story. It hasn't really gotten much coverage.
Of course not. Of course not, because this organization has so little to do with Black lives. It's just a political organization. Chris, want to ask your reaction. They're spending $4 million on paying people and partying and traveling, and about $300,000 going to the actual chapters and going to the work being done. Does it shock you?
No, it doesn't shock me at all.
Yeah.
I talk about BLM all the time, and I call them Black Lives Matter, and not Black Lives, because if you look at what they're actually about and what they're doing for the community, they're not really doing anything that benefits or helps the Black community. I did an event here in New York called my Turn New York Red Rally for the CRA group that I founded. And when we did the event, Black Lives Matter showed up, and I even said, okay, I'll speak on your game. You guys say Black Lives Matter? I say all Black Lives matter. What about the Black lives that have been lost in the past 6 months at your rallies? There's been over 50 people killed in Black Lives Matter rallies in the past 6 months. Either that be local police officers who are Black, protesters who are Black, protesters who were against the Black Lives Matter protesters who came out who were Black. David Dorm, a former police officer, was killed in front of his friend's business, a small business that a Black friend of him that he owned, and he was defending the business, and he got shot and murdered in front of the business on Facebook Live. And Black youth from Black Lives Matter did it, and they mocked him and made fun of him while he was dying. Right. So I tell people all the time, you guys claim Black Lives Matter, the same thing as Antifa claiming anti-fascist, when they're in reality using fascist behavior. So you guys say you Black Lives Matter, but you do nothing for Black lives. If anything, you remove Black lives. Yeah. So how do you stand up for the Black life? It's more the organization behind the name that's a problem. It's
an embarrassment, Chris. I completely agree with you. Andrew, just the final word here to you. I mean, you see all these organizations. We just talked about the Time's Up movement yesterday, the Hollywood one that goes after sexual harassment. They've been blowing all their money on partying and salaries as well. Should the government step in with these things? Should there be some kind of mandate that says you can't do this kind of behavior?
Was that for me?
Yeah, Andrew. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I mean, how do you prevent this kind of behavior? It's just so ridiculous to me that you have these organizations that bring in all of this money. A lot of them pay nothing in taxes, and then they blow it all paying themselves and traveling around to go to fancy, events in other countries.
Yeah, the Black Lives Matter, the organizational structure is interesting. The local chapters that, again, are the ones that, according to the movement, are the ones that do the work on the ground. They're legally separate from the national arm. Right. So that's a good question. If there's any illegality here with them not providing a sufficient amount to these to local chapters.
Right.
I'm not sure, but a question of like ethically, they're taking in, especially after the George Floyd death in May. Black Lives Matter received the windfall of contributions.
Absolutely. And they blow it.
What are they going to be doing with that money? These untold millions of dollars. That's something that should be scrutinized for sure.
I absolutely agree, Andrew, and I agree. Andrew and Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Great story, Andrew. We appreciate your time. Chris, you as well.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate your time as well.
All right. Good to